The alarm rang through the halls of the Vexery Command Center like a scream. Every screen turned red. Every soldier stopped moving. Commander Deho looked up from his work and felt his blood turn cold. 12 cubs were missing. The Vexery were not a species that knew fear. They stood 7 feet tall on average. Their bodies were covered in thick fur that could stop a blade. Their claws could cut through metal. Their eyes could see in complete darkness. For 10,000 years, they had been the greatest hunters in their part of the galaxy. Nothing scared them, but the message on the screen made Deho's hand shake. The cubs had been on a training patrol near the northern mountains. It was supposed to be simple. Walk through the forest. Learn to track. Come home before dark. 20 young Vexery from the War Academy, the children of the most powerful families on the planet. And now 12 of them were gone. Deho ran to the communication room. Officers were already there, shouting at each other, pulling up maps and sensor readings. The noise was so loud that Deho had to roar to make them stop. "Report," he said. His voice was steady, but inside he was falling apart. A young officer named Sora stepped forward. Her fur was standing on end with stress. "Commander, the patrol split into 2 groups this morning. Group 1 returned on time. Group 2 never came back. We sent a signal. No answer. We sent another. Nothing. The last transmission we received was 3 hours ago. Show me." Sora pressed a button. A hologram appeared in the center of the room. It showed a rocky path near the mountains. In the image, 12 small figures walked in a line. Cubs. Children. Some were barely old enough to walk without help. And at the front of the line was a human. Deho felt his stomach drop. The human was a female named Una Park. She was a sergeant from Earth, sent to Theron 4 as part of a cultural exchange program. Deho had met her several times. She was small by human standards, with dark hair and quiet eyes. She smiled a lot. The cubs seemed to like her. But now, looking at the hologram, Deho saw something that made his fur rise. Una was leading the cubs away from the main path. She was taking them toward the unmarked sector, the area that was flagged for seismic danger. "Why would she do that?" Sora asked. Deho did not answer. He did not know. The door behind them crashed open. A massive Vexery female stormed into the room. Her name was Velka, and she was the High Huntress of the Northern Clans. Her daughter was one of the missing cubs. "Where is my child?" Velka's voice was like thunder. Her claws were out. Her eyes burned with a mother's rage. Right behind her came another figure, War Chief Torvin. He was even bigger than Velka, with scars covering his face and arms from 100 battles. His daughter Kira was also among the missing. "The human," Torvin growled. "The human took them." "We do not know that," Deho said quickly. "Look at the image." Torvin pointed at the hologram. "She is leading them into the danger zone. She is alone with our children. What more do you need to see?" Deho wanted to argue, but he could not find the words. The evidence looked bad. Very bad. Within an hour, the news spread across the entire colony. 12 predator cubs were missing. A human was the last one seen with them. Panic turned into anger. Anger turned into rage. Crowds gathered outside the human embassy. They shouted and threw things at the walls. Security forces had to form a line to keep them back. Inside the embassy, the human ambassador tried to call for calm, but no one was listening. Ambassador Jiho arrived at the command center as the sun began to set. He was an older Vexery with gray fur and tired eyes. He had spent his whole life trying to build peace between species. Now he watched that peace falling apart. "We must not act without facts," Jiho said to the council. "The human may be innocent. There may be an explanation." "Innocent?" Velka laughed bitterly. "She took our cubs into a death zone. There is no innocent explanation for that." Perhaps she was trying to protect them from something, Jiho suggested. Protect them? She is a human. Soft skin, no claws. No fangs. What could she possibly protect them from? Torvin slammed his fist on the table. Enough talk. I want search teams in the air now. And if we find that human with even one scratch on my daughter, I will kill her myself. Daeho stood silent in the corner, watching the chaos unfold. He remembered meeting Yuna for the first time. She had been nervous but polite. She had asked questions about Vexery culture and listened carefully to the answers. When the cubs had crowded around her out of curiosity, she had not been afraid. She had knelt down to their level and introduced herself to each one by name. That was not the behavior of someone who would hurt children, but Daeho kept this thought to himself. In the room full of angry parents and frightened officials, there was no space for doubt. There was only fear and fury. Outside, the sky grew dark. Somewhere in the mountains, 12 cubs and 1 human were alone in the cold. The ground beneath them was unstable. The air was filled with danger, and no one was coming to save them, not yet. Yuna Park had not planned to become a hero. She had come to Theron 4 to escape her past, not to create a new future. But the universe had other ideas. 3 hours earlier, the patrol had been going well. The cubs walked in a neat line through the forest, practicing their tracking skills. They found animal prints in the mud. They identified plants by smell. They competed to see who could move the quietest through the bushes. Yuna walked at the back of the group, watching them with a small smile. She was supposed to be an observer only. The Vexery teachers did not need her help. But the cubs had decided they liked her, and they kept running back to show her things they had found. Sergeant Yuna, look. A feather. Sergeant Yuna, I found a rock shaped like a ship. Sergeant Yuna, watch how fast I can climb this tree. She praised each discovery like it was the most amazing thing she had ever seen. The cubs glowed with pride. Yuna had not felt this kind of warmth in a long time. Back on Earth, she had been close to her younger brother, Junho. He had been curious and brave, just like these cubs. He had asked a million questions and never stopped moving. He had driven her crazy sometimes, but she had loved him more than anything. Then the mining accident happened. Junho was only 16. He died in the dark, alone, trapped under tons of rock on Mars. Yuna had been on a different planet when she got the news. She could not even go to his funeral. After that, she volunteered for every faraway assignment she could find. She ran from her grief across the galaxy. And somehow, she ended up here, surrounded by alien children who reminded her of everything she had lost. The lead teacher, a stern Vexery named Master Howan, called for a rest break. The cubs sat down to eat their packed lunches. Yuna leaned against a tree and looked up at the sky. That was when she felt it, a vibration in the ground. Very small. Most people would not notice it. But Yuna had grown up in earthquake zones on Earth. She knew that feeling in her bones. She put her hand flat on the ground. The vibration came again. Stronger this time. Master Howan, she called out. Something is wrong. The old Vexery looked at her with confusion. What do you mean? Before Yuna could answer, the ground cracked open. It happened so fast. One moment, the forest floor was solid. The next moment, a hole appeared and swallowed one of the transport vehicles whole. Dirt and rocks flew everywhere. Cubs screamed. Trees fell. Yuna moved without thinking. She grabbed the 2 cubs nearest to her and pulled them away from the edge of the growing crack. Master Howan tried to do the same, but the ground under his feet gave way. He fell into the darkness with a terrible cry. More cracks appeared. The earth was breaking apart in every direction. Yuna looked around wildly. She saw a cave opening in the hillside nearby. The rock there looked stable, solid. Everyone follow me, she shouted. Now, run! The cubs were frozen with fear. They were predators, bred for battle, but they were still children. They had never faced anything like this. Una grabbed the nearest cub and pushed her toward the cave. Go, go! Something in her voice broke through their panic. The cubs started running. Una counted them as they passed her. 1, 2, 3, 4. She kept counting until she reached 12. 12 cubs. All alive. She was the last one into the cave. Behind her, the entire hillside collapsed. The entrance filled with dust and falling rocks. When the shaking finally stopped, Una found herself in complete darkness. Her ears were ringing. Her hands were bleeding from the rocks she had pushed aside. But she was alive. The cubs were alive. Is everyone okay? She called out. 12 small voices answered. Some were crying. Some were trying to be brave. All of them were scared. Una pulled out her flashlight and turned it on. The beam cut through the darkness and showed a narrow cave tunnel stretching ahead. The cubs huddled together in a group, their large eyes reflecting the light. One of them, a girl named Kira, stepped forward. She was taller than the others and had the proud look of a warrior's daughter. Where is Master Howan? Kira demanded. Una swallowed hard. He did not make it. Silence. Then the crying started again. Una wanted to cry too. She wanted to sit down and give up and let someone else handle this. But there was no one else. She was the only adult. These 12 children were her responsibility now. She took a deep breath and put on her calmest voice. I know you are scared. I am scared too. But we are alive, and that means we can survive. I need you to trust me. Can you do that? The cubs looked at each other. Kira's eyes were hard with suspicion. You are just a human, she said. You have no claws, no fangs, no night vision. How can you protect us? Una met her gaze without flinching. I have something better, she said. I have a promise. I promise that I will get all of you home. Every single one. No matter what it takes. Kira stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, she nodded. Fine, the young Vexery said. We will follow you. For now, Una turned and faced the dark tunnel ahead. She had no idea where it led. She had no idea if there was another way out. She only knew that she could not fail. Not this time. She started walking, and 12 predator cubs followed the small human into the unknown. Commander Deho stood at the edge of the disaster zone and felt his heart break. The search team had arrived at dawn. What they found was worse than anyone had imagined. The entire northern slope of the mountain had collapsed. Trees lay scattered like broken toys. Massive holes opened into the earth, so deep that even Vexery eyes could not see the bottom. The ground was still shaking with small aftershocks. No one could survive this, said Lieutenant Minho. He was young but experienced, and his voice was flat with despair. We should prepare the families for bad news. Not yet, Deho said quietly. We search first. We find proof. Behind them, War Chief Torvin was pacing like a caged animal. He had not slept. He had not eaten. His eyes were red and wild. Every few minutes, he would call his daughter's name into the empty air. Kira! Kira! No answer came. A young tracker named Hana approached the group. She was small for a Vexery, with quick movements and sharp eyes. Unlike most of her people, she had spent time with the human liaison officer. She and Una had eaten meals together and talked about their different worlds. Commander, Hana said, I found something. She led them to the edge of a collapsed section. There, in the soft dirt, were footprints. Small Vexery prints, the kind cubs would make. And next to them, a different shape, flat, narrow, human. They came this way, Hana said. Look at the pattern. The human prints are on the outside. She was walking at the edge of the group. So? Torvin growled. She was leading them to their deaths. No, Hannah shook her head. She was walking on the dangerous side. Look here and here. She put herself between the cubs and the unstable ground. She was shielding them. Torvin opened his mouth to argue, but the evidence was clear. The footprints told a story that words could not change. They followed the trail. It wound through fallen trees and around deep cracks in the earth. At every dangerous point, the pattern was the same. The human prints were always on the outside, always facing the threat. She guided them, Minho said with surprise in his voice. Through all of this chaos, she found a safe path. Or she was lucky, Torvin muttered. But his voice had lost some of its anger. The trail led to a hillside. Half of it had fallen away, but there was a dark opening in the rock. A cave. The footprints went straight inside. They went in there, Hannah said. All of them. I count 12 sets of cub prints and 1 human. Then we go in after them, Deho said. The cave was narrow and dark. Even with their night vision, the Vexri had to move carefully. The rocks were unstable. Small pieces kept falling from the ceiling. The air smelled old and dead. Torvin was the first one through the tight spaces. He did not care about his own safety. He only cared about finding his daughter. They walked for what felt like hours. The cave twisted and turned. Sometimes it opened into larger chambers. Sometimes it squeezed so tight that they had to crawl on their bellies. Then Hannah stopped and sniffed the air. Blood, she said. Human blood. Not much, but fresh. Torvin's eyes narrowed. She is hurt. Or she hurt herself protecting the cubs, Hannah suggested. They move faster now. The blood trail was faint, but steady. Drops here and there on the rocks. Smears on the walls where someone had leaned for support. Then they heard something. A voice. Soft and distant, echoing through the stone tunnels. Human words, spoken in a gentle rhythm. And so the brave knight climbed the highest mountain. She was tired. She was hungry. But she did not stop. Because she had made a promise, and she would not break it. Deho held up his hand. Everyone stopped moving. She is telling them a story, he whispered. They crept closer, moving as quietly as only Vexri hunters could. The voice grew clearer. They could hear other sounds now, too. Small bodies shifting. The soft breathing of sleeping children. Finally, they reached a large chamber. Deho peered around the corner and saw a sight he would never forget. 12 Vexri cubs lay in a pile in the center of the cave. They were huddled together for warmth, their small chests rising and falling with peaceful sleep. Around them, someone had built a wall of rocks to block the cold. Wind that came from deeper in the cave. And sitting with her back against that wall, her eyes fixed on the only entrance, was Sergeant Una Park. She looked terrible. Her uniform was torn and dirty. Her hands were wrapped in bloody cloth. Her face was pale and thin, like she had not eaten in days. But her eyes were alert, watching. Guarding Dot in her lap, curled up like a kitten, was Kira, Torvin's daughter. Una saw them first. Her body went stiff. Her hand moved toward a small knife at her belt. Then she recognized them, and her whole body sagged with relief. "Oh, thank God," she whispered. "You found us." Torvin pushed past Deho. He ran to his daughter and dropped to his knees. Kira woke up and saw her father's face. For a moment, she just stared. Then she threw her arms around his neck and started crying. "Papa! Papa, you came." Torvin held her tight. His massive body shook with silent sobs. The fierce war chief, who had never shown weakness, wept openly in the dark cave. One by one, the other cubs woke up. They saw the rescue team and started calling out. The chamber filled with noise and movement and joy. But Daiho stood still, watching the human. Yuna had not moved. She sat against the wall, watching the reunions with a tired smile. She did not ask for help. She did not draw attention to herself. She just sat there, bleeding and exhausted, like her job was finally done. How long? Daiho asked her quietly. 5 days, Yuna answered. 5 days since the collapse. How did you keep them alive? Yuna looked at the cubs, then back at Daiho. I made them a promise, she said simply. I did not break my promises. Then her eyes closed, and she passed out against the cold stone wall. The first day was the hardest. The cubs were scared and confused. They cried for their parents. They fought with each other. They blamed Yuna for everything that had happened. Some of them refused to move. Others wanted to run back to the collapsed entrance and dig their way out with their claws. Yuna let them feel their feelings. She did not tell them to be quiet or to be brave. She just sat near the entrance and kept watch while they worked through their fear. When the crying finally stopped, Kira stood up and faced her. What do we do now, human? Yuna looked at the group. 12 pairs of eyes stared back at her, waiting, hoping, scared. First, she said, we take count of what we have. Empty your packs. Put everything in the middle. The cubs obeyed. Soon there was a small pile of supplies in the center of the cave. Some food bars. A few water containers. A medical kit. Some tools. Not much, but enough to start. Good, Yuna said. Now we ration this. Small portions 3 times a day. No one takes extra. No one goes hungry. We share everything equally. A larger cub named Timon crossed his arms. That is not how Vexery do things. The strong take what they need. The weak follow. Yuna met his eyes calmly. That is how Vexery survive in the wild. But we are not in the wild. We are in a cave with no exit, limited food, and no rescue coming soon. If we fight each other, we all die. If we work together, we all live. You choose. Timon glared at her for a long moment. Then he looked away. Fine, he muttered. We do it your way. For now. The second day, they explored the caves. Yuna organized the cubs into pairs. Each pair went down a different tunnel with instructions to mark their path and return within 1 hour. She stayed at the central chamber with the youngest cubs, the ones too small for exploring. The search teams came back with reports. Most tunnels ended in dead walls or collapsed sections. But one team, led by Kira, found something important. There is a stream, Kira reported. Underground water. It is cold but clean. Yuna smiled for the first time since the collapse. Good. Water means we can survive longer. We refill our containers every day. That night, Yuna divided the food rations. She gave each cub their share. But when Tamon looked at her hands, he saw they were empty. Where is your portion? He asked. I am not hungry, Yuna said. That is a lie. Kira's voice was sharp. Humans need food just like we do. Why are you not eating? Yuna hesitated. The truth was simple. There was not enough food for 13 beings. If she ate her share, the cubs would run out sooner. So she had decided to skip her portions. She could survive on less. She had done it before. I am an adult, she said finally. I can handle hunger better than you can. Eat your food. The cubs exchanged looks. Something shifted in their eyes. They had expected the human to be weak and selfish. Instead, she was starving herself to keep them fed. The third day brought danger. A small cub named Bora wandered away from the group while Yuna was checking the water supply. When she came back, the other cubs were shouting. Bora fell. She is stuck. Yuna ran to the commotion. One of the tunnels had a deep hole hidden under loose rocks. Bora had stepped on it and fallen through. She was hanging by her claws on the edge, crying for help. The rocks around the hole were cracking. If anyone stepped too close, they would fall too. Yuna did not hesitate. She lay flat on her stomach and crawled toward the edge. The rocks groaned under her weight. She reached out her hand. "Grab me, Bora. I will pull you up." "I cannot reach." Yuna pushed herself closer. The edge started to crumble. She felt herself sliding forward. "Sergeant Yuna, stop!" Kira shouted. "You will fall!" But Yuna kept going. Her fingers touched Bora's fur. She grabbed the cub's arm and pulled with all her strength. Bora came up out of the hole, but the edge collapsed completely. Yuna twisted her body and threw Bora toward safety. Then the rocks gave way and she fell. She hit the ground hard. Pain exploded through her side. She heard something crack. For a moment, she could not breathe. "Sergeant Yuna!" The cubs crowded around the hole, looking down. It was not deep, maybe twice Yuna's height. But the fall had hurt her badly. She lay still for a long moment, trying to understand what was broken. 2 ribs, at least. Maybe 3. Every breath felt like fire. But she was alive. And Bora was safe. Slowly, painfully, she stood up. She found handholds in the rock wall and climbed back up. The cubs helped pull her over the edge. Bora was crying and apologizing over and over. Yuna put a gentle hand on her head. "It is okay," she said. "You are safe. That is what matters." That night, Yuna could not hide her injuries. She wrapped her ribs with cloth from the medical kit, but every movement made her wince. Kira watched her struggle in silence. When everyone else was asleep, she came and sat next to Yuna. "Why did you do that?" Kira asked. "You could have died. Bora is not your family. She's not even your species." Yuna thought about the question for a long time. "I had a brother once," she said finally. "He was young, curious, always getting into trouble, just like Bora. One day, he got into trouble I could not save him from. He died alone in the dark, just like this." She looked at Kira with eyes full of old pain. "I could not save him, but I can save all of you. Every single one. That is enough reason for me." Kira was quiet. Then she did something Yuna did not expect. She leaned her head against Yuna's shoulder. "I am sorry about your brother," the young Vexari whispered. "Thank you," Yuna whispered back. They sat together in the darkness. A predator cub and a human stranger, and waited for rescue to come. The 4th day, the cubs started calling her something new. Not Sergeant Yuna, not human. They called her Guardian. The medical team arrived within minutes of the rescue. They carried Yuna out of the cave on a stretcher. She was unconscious, her body finally giving up after 5 days of running on willpower alone. The cubs followed close behind, refusing to let her out of their sight. Outside, the sun was bright and warm. Families were waiting. When the cubs emerged from the darkness, the air filled with cries of joy and relief. Parents ran forward to grab their children. Tears flowed freely. Prayers were spoken. But through all the chaos, the cubs kept looking back at the stretcher where Yuna lay. Even as their parents held them tight, they watched the human who had saved them. War Chief Torvin carried Kira in his arms. She was too old to be carried like a baby, but he did not care. His daughter was alive. Nothing else mattered. "Tell me everything," he said to her. "What happened in there?" So Kira told him. She told him about the collapse and Master Hound's death. She told him about the dark caves and the limited food. She told him about Yuna's rationing system and her refusal to eat. She told him about the fall and the broken ribs. She told him about the stories Yuna told to keep them calm and the songs she sang when they could not sleep. By the time Kira finished, Torvin was completely still. "She never slept," Kira said. "Every time I woke up at night, She was sitting by the entrance, watching, protecting. She told me that humans can stay awake for days if they need to. She said her species evolved as endurance hunters. They do not give up. They do not stop. They just keep going until the job is done. Torvin looked at the stretcher being loaded into a medical transport. The small human looked so fragile, so breakable. And yet she had done something that even the strongest Vexery warriors would struggle to do. She saved you, he said quietly. A human saved my daughter. She saved all of us, Kira corrected. And she almost died doing it. Father, she is not what we thought humans were. She is something else. Something better. The council met 3 days later. Yuna was still in the hospital, recovering from her injuries. The doctor said she had 2 broken ribs, severe dehydration, early signs of starvation, and complete exhaustion. Her body would heal, but she needed weeks of rest. The cubs, however, were in perfect health. Not a single one had been seriously hurt. All 12 had survived 5 days underground without food, water problems, or injury. It was a miracle. Or rather, it was a human. High Huntress Velka stood before the council. Her face was serious, but her eyes were soft. I owe this human my apology, she said. When my daughter went missing, I blamed the alien among us. I called for punishment. I spoke of revenge. I was wrong. She bowed her head in shame. Sergeant Yuna Park did not take our children. She saved them. She bled for them. She starved for them. She put her own life below theirs at every moment. This is not the behavior of a predator hunting prey. This is the behavior of something else. The council chamber was silent. Everyone waited. Velka raised her head. Our ancestors had a word for such beings. Creatures who protected the young, not because of blood or duty, but because of love. They called them Velker, guardian beasts. A gasp ran through the room. The title of Velker had not been given in over 300 years. It was the highest honor a non-Vexery could receive. It meant being accepted as a protector of sacred life. Ambassador Jiho stood up slowly. Are you suggesting we grant this title to the human? I am not suggesting, Velka said firmly. I am demanding it. One by one, the other parents stood. Torvin, the families of all 12 cubs. They stood together and spoke with one voice. Valker, guardian beast, protector of our children. The vote was unanimous. When Yuna woke up, she found her hospital room full of flowers. Vexery flowers, strange and beautiful, in every color she could imagine. Cards were piled on every surface. Drawings from the cubs. Notes from their families. Messages of thanks and praise. Commander Deho was sitting in a chair by her bed. What happened? She asked, her voice still weak. Deho smiled. You became a legend, Sergeant Park. He told her about the council meeting, about the title, about the ceremony that was being planned in her honor. Yuna listened with wide eyes, unable to believe what she was hearing. I was just doing my job, she said finally. No, Deho shook his head. You were doing much more than that. You showed us something about humans that we never understood before. Your species is not weak. You are strong in a different way. You do not have claws or fangs, but you have something else. You have stubbornness. You have endurance. You have a refusal to give up that borders on insanity. He leaned forward. And you have love. Love that crosses species lines. Love that makes you bleed for strangers. That is not weakness, Sergeant. That is the most dangerous weapon in the galaxy. 2 weeks later, Yuna stood in the great hall of the Vexery capital. She was wearing a special uniform made for the ceremony. Around her neck hung a medallion with the symbol of the Velker. The guardian beast, the 12 cubs she had saved, stood in front of her. They wore matching uniforms and stood in a perfect line. When the ceremony asked them to speak, Kira stepped forward as their representative. "We were alone in the dark," she said. "We were scared and hungry and lost. We thought we would die. But then our guardian showed us how to survive. Not with claws or strength. With patience. With hope. With a promise that she would never break." Kira turned to face Yuna directly. "You said humans are persistence hunters. That your ancestors followed their prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. We thought that made you dangerous. Now we understand. You do not just hunt things until they die. You protect things until they are safe. You do not stop. You do not quit. You keep going until the job is done." She bowed deeply. All 12 cubs bowed with her. "Thank you, Guardian. Thank you for not giving up on us." Yuna felt tears running down her face. She did not try to stop them. "I made you a promise," she said simply. "I do not break my promises." The crowd erupted in cheers. Vexery warriors who had wanted her dead now raised their fists in salute. Parents who had blamed her now shouted her name with gratitude. Ambassador Jiho stood in the back, wiping his eyes and smiling. And somewhere far away, on a small planet called Earth, the spirit of a young boy named Junho watched his sister finally find peace. She could not save him, but she had saved 12 other children. That was enough. That was more than enough. In the years that followed, the story of Sergeant Yuna Park spread across the galaxy. It became a legend among many species. The tale of the small human who walked into darkness with predator cubs and brought them back to the light. The cubs who survived that cave grew up to become leaders, warriors, teachers, and they never forgot the lessons they learned in those 5 dark days. They taught their own children about the human guardian, who showed them that true strength was not about claws or fangs. True strength was about keeping your promises, no matter what. And Yuna? She stayed on Theron 4. The War Academy invited her to teach survival training to their students. She accepted. Her classes were always full. Her students called themselves Yuna's Pack. And whenever someone asked her what made humans special, she would smile and say the same thing. We do not know how to give up. It is not in our nature. We just keep going. That is who we are. That is who humans have always been. That is why the galaxy learned to respect soft-skinned persistence hunters from a small blue planet called Earth. Not because they were the strongest, or the fastest, or the deadliest, but because they simply refused to stop.